Okay, thanks for kind of joining us as we come back together with the Bloodhound Pix episode. This is going to be a special one where we are talking about the Fantasia Film Festival that we got to be a part of. And we watched 8 of the movies. There was a ton of great stuff, there was a ton of other stuff. But yeah, we're going to kind of, instead of giving you a list of our breakdown from, you know, worst to best or things like that. We're instead going to kind of just talk about the highlights, talk about the festival as a whole, some of the stuff that we noticed was a recurring thing throughout the festival, and so on. Um, but before all that, as always, we'll introduce 3 of ourselves. I am one of your co-hosts, Craig.
I'm Kyle.
And Josh.
Yeah, so this is something that we've kind of been on hiatus during the summer, but we had the pleasure of doing Fantasia during that time. And there's Kyle's dog, Raphael. If you watch the YouTube version, you'll get to see him. But anyways, so how do we want to work this? Do we want to say before, or do we want to discuss how we viewed the festival as a whole? From what we saw, of course, there was plenty of other stuff, so we can really only base the festival off of the 8 movies that we were able to watch.
Yeah, I mean, we can say that it was a mixed bag.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Kyle, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Kyle, that's a really nice way of putting it, Kyle.
I mean, well, yeah. I'm trying to be diplomatic. We obviously also didn't see everything, like Craig said, and there was like a bunch of stuff we wanted to see that we weren't able to see, so it's not like we have an objective point of view exactly. Yeah. But
one of the things with festivals like this, especially kind of it was interesting with moving forward, because it was the virtual festival. It's the first one we've done where it's been a virtual festival, and so you could kind of see that they're finding their footing with a lot of stuff. But it was one of those of that they gave a list of the screeners that were being offered. There were some movies that the screeners weren't, and then you had to request 3 at a time. But then some of those ones that you requested weren't available, but they could be available if it had to be sent directly to the PR firm of. So it was kind of all these weird ins and outs and loops and everything we had to go through. Some of them obviously came easily right away, and that was great. But it was interesting kind of process, and I mean, most festivals seem like they're going that route. At least this year and probably next year, all the festivals are going that route. So it was interesting to kind of be a part of that and see how it works. But yeah, let's talk about kind of it as a whole. I personally kind of agree with Kyle. I think, before we begin some more, Kyle is talking, so I'll have him talk more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we've done a couple film festivals now. It's pretty standard that the quality is going to be pretty wide across the board. There's going to be some stuff you don't care for, some really good stuff, and it's going to be kind of a mixed bag. But I did think they had some really good Q&A extra stuff, which was all free, I think, even if you weren't even part of the, like, reviewing anything. Like a little tribute to John Carpenter, which was just good to see him alive. And Simon Barrett's like 2-hour thing on The Business was fucking great. I don't think I watched any of the other ones, but those were pretty cool. Those were a highlight.
Yeah, and those are, I think, after they aired, I guess, live, or however you want to put it, they were put onto YouTube. I don't know if by the time this episode airs, or even if they're still on YouTube now, but I know they were.
I think so. It was kind of weird. You had to look under past live streams to find them, okay. Which was, they weren't like with their videos or something, but I think they're still there.
Okay. What did you think, Josh?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't get to see the Simon one. I know that he did it live during a time when I wasn't going to be able to do it. and I love him. But I did watch the Carpenter thing live. I mean, that was on Saturday, and that was amazing. I mean, my admiration for Carpenter is just, it's through the fucking roof. And it was funny as hell too. I liked, former Fangoria editor-in-chief Tony Timponi was the one doing the questions for Carpenter, and I thought he asked some good stuff, especially considering, is there a fucking question that John Carpenter has never heard, at this point in his life? I thought it was hilarious when he brought up the Escape from New York remake, and it's, I believe, now Lee Whannell's, and John Carpenter had lost track of who was even involved with it and didn't know. But yeah, so that was great, because it was also a lifetime achievement for Carpenter, which he clearly deserves.
Yeah, I know. Well, Carpenter is very much, for those listening that are fans of him or not. You should know John Carpenter a little bit by some of his work, but he's very much about, anybody can remake his stuff, just give him the paycheck, has kind of always been his motto about it.
I mean, he deserves that. I think the world said fuck you to The Thing.
Yep.
When it shouldn't have. And he kind of deserves to just be like, I don't care anymore.
Which the funny part, E.T. is still a classic.
Yeah.
But I think it ended up, it's, I don't know, kind of withstood the test of time a little bit better than E.T. The Thing has.
Especially with the weird shit that Spielberg did to later releases of E.T.
Yeah.
Which I don't think I've ever seen, but supposedly replacing guns with flashlights that the
walkie-talkies or something.
Yeah.
I remember, South Park made a episode on it, where it's everybody, I forgot the whole thing, but everybody had walkie-talkies instead of guns or something like that.
It goes to show you the difference between those two filmmakers.
Speaking of the...
No, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah. I was just going to say, speaking of The Thing, too, it was funny as shit when he let that Blumhouse shit slip out, and you could tell that he wasn't supposed to say anything about it. And then it was literally, I think, the following Monday, that news of whatever the fuck Jason Blum's going to do with The Thing came out. So that was funny, too.
So it's not like a remake like that, the 2011 one, where it's connected to John Carpenter's. It's another, how do people put it, another re-adaptation of the source material or something. So it'll be a new story, I think. Or will it be a sequel to?
I don't know.
Carpenter? Yeah, see. I don't know. It's one of those things.
I have no idea.
But I know there's the PlayStation 2. That's technically a sequel because John Carpenter signed off on it.
That great game where you just...
You talking about the video game?
Yeah, it's in canon, so it is a sequel, and it establishes that both McReady and Childs were human. So,
and it establishes how much we all suck at video games. That video game is so hard.
I know. I remember I rented that thing probably 3 times and got barely any progress in it.
You're just like, oh shit, that guy's the Thing, and now I'm dead, or you just freeze to death.
Yeah. So, I wonder if that's still, you can find that with on one of those PlayStation networks or something like that, because I'd like to try that again.
It's probably out there somewhere.
Yeah. So with that being said, there were some great chats, and I know they even sent out a call beforehand where they were asking people if they wanted to be a part of the chat or to do a special lecture or stuff like that. But so the movie,
you should have done a special lecture on David Cronenberg, Craig.
Yeah, I could have talked about The Brood. Crash and Dead Ring and History of Violence. So all the ones that nobody wants to hear about.
Craig's 9-hour Cronenberg lecture.
Yeah. So that gets us into the movies we saw. There were the ones we weren't able to, obviously there was Neil Marshall, who is known for The Descent, Dog Soldiers, Doomsday, which I love a lot. He's done a lot of he did a bunch of Game of Thrones episodes more recently, and then the remake of Hellboy. So this was supposed to be his return to the horror genre, and he's kind of one of those directors that can, like many do, made that comment that he didn't want to be known as a horror director, so he went in that route, but now he's returning to the horror genre. We didn't get to see that one, but that was, I know, one of the big, like, non-independent, or well, I think it's technically independent in a way, but it's like a studio independent film, so not in the same sense. But that one was premiering there. There was another one we wanted to check out was 12-Hour Shift, which was Bree Grant, who's kind of a big actress in the indie horror world. She's been in, I can't even, Beyond the Gates, I think was one of them. A bunch of stuff. Kind of all those, as I'll bring up multiple times in our reviews, if you ever watch or read our written ones, the mumblegore genre, which is mumblecore, but the horror version. It's basically where Simon Barrett and a bunch of those guys all got their start. A lot of the Larry Fessenden stuff is, I guess, considered in that vein. But do we want to start with the stuff the issues that we kind of noticed throughout a lot of these? Do we want to name the ones that, if our reviews are up, that our written reviews are out on Ginger Nuts of Horror, which you can check out, but yeah. So you'll know what ones we're probably discussing if we don't personally voice them, if on the ones that we had issue with. But yeah, so let's talk about the little negatives that we saw here and there, and then we'll end on a positive note instead of the other way around.
Good call.
Yeah. So Kyle, because I know Kyle is one of the most, probably the voiced his opinion the most in this festival.
It was the same problem we continually see most of the time, which is just an underdeveloped script. Which, we all get it. You're making an independent movie, you have limited resources, limited everything, but you want to do something anyways. But nothing stops you from continuing to work on the script until it's ready. So, versus the problem is there's no narrative drive. That's what happened. That's generally what people lack, is like, well, we have one location and 3 people and kind of an idea for something that would be cool, but we can't show you this, that. I can't build a cool monster. I can't really show a bunch of action. We can't open the story up location-wise, so how do we compress everything? But then they don't write a script with any alternative. So then you're just sitting around waiting for something to happen, and because it's an 80-minute movie and they don't have any fucking money, that nothing is going to happen till minute 72. But they don't come up with anything good for those 72 minutes. So by the time anything happens, I don't give a shit. And I'm angry because you wasted my time. And I'm old and the world's fucking ending and I don't know how much time I have left. And now I'm watching this, and you promised me something. You promised me scares, horror, something, and you gave me nothing.
So,
I think our episode's over. I can't really fucking contribute anything after that.
Yeah. But that is one of those issues. We've brought it up at not, I think this one was, maybe it was just a batch we got, but it was more apparent than other. It's an issue we've brought up at every festival, but it was always like 2 of them were like that, and then the rest were either in that it was good, but may have had some problems here and there, or it was excellent. And this was kind of one of those where I think it was more front and center. I don't know why. Um, but yeah, it also, moving forward, it is this time period where technically everything looks great. So we can't really ever knock, one of these movies for, oh, it's bad camera work, or it's doesn't look good, or the sound is awful, or whatever, because it's so easy to have a technically, savvy film nowadays. So I think what that does is really make the story then shine forward, because if we have nothing else to look at and find criticism for, then which we're not looking for criticism, obviously. But I know some people are, but I don't think we necessarily ever try. But yeah, it really makes the story kind of front and center. And
well, that brings up a good point, that I think it makes it more difficult to weed things out for a lot of people. You know what I mean? Like, because everything kind of, it's maybe less obvious the quality of the story for some people, because it looks good and it looks smooth and slick and whatever.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And I think for all of these, the ones that we viewed, the acting is great, and for the most part, there may be some issues here or there, but it seemed like the acting was fine. It seemed like it was like every technical aspect was fine. It just came down to story. For me, that's what any of the ones I'm looking at that we looked at, are reviewed. That was the issue.
I mean, so of the 8 we saw, honestly, I was smart and wrote every one of these down before we started. And of the 8 we saw, I thought only 2 of them made me almost kill myself. So you know what I'm saying? So that's pretty good. That's pretty good odds in terms of, if you get 8 screeners and only 2 of them are that miserable, those are pretty good odds. And we don't need to say what they are, but you've already kind of said it, Kyle, and Craig, you too, that the fucking story was the biggest problem in both of them, right? Because one of them, it should have been a 20-minute short film. Without question, it did not have 90 minutes of story at all. And the other one was just completely ambiguous in ways that, being ambiguous is fine, but this was so ambiguous that it was like, I don't think it was done intentionally. I think it was like, oh, we haven't really fleshed this out. We haven't really decided what we're doing here. What the fuck ever. And it made it hard to get through.
I mean, what I will say with that, so I don't know, it was for me. So the two, we actually, I think, all agreed. Normally there's 1 or 2 each festival where I think there's some opposites, and it's never fully like one of us says it's a 1, one of us says it's a 5. I don't think we've ever had that issue yet, but there might be some slight variation, but I feel like this festival we were all kind of in the same range of, if something was, we'll do our rating out of a 1 through 5 scale. So if something was a 4, then one of us may have a 3.5 or whatever, but they were kind of all roughly, we're roughly together. And that's not saying these 2 movies, I think it was like they started off and they had nuggets of like gold or something. They had these elements that you felt like, either if the script went through another refinement or in another person's hands or something, they would be a lot of fun. I mean, one of them, I'm basically going to give the name probably by saying this, because I really enjoyed this aspect of, it takes a kind of new cultural approach, and I love the idea. I love that approach to it. It felt fresh. And then by minute whatever
21,
then it was just like, okay, so what do we do, but and then the other one was the same thing. You had these moments of great acting, you had these moments of dread, and that something great could be used out of it between these relationships and this. But then again, what happens?
Yeah, they never. I mean, one of them, at least for me, by minute 21, was pretty much incomprehensible. Um, but yeah, I mean, both of them didn't really develop the characters, and that's all you have. That's like, okay, all you guys have is like a house and some people, and you can maybe do one or two cool things, and you got to use those like for the climax because that's all you got. So you have to like delve into these characters and figure out some way for that to be interesting to watch, whether it's funny or scary or whatever.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it, and I think that's what bothers me. I mean, why not just work on the writing some more? Than you like, no one's waiting for these films. Unfortunately, you know what I mean? Like they're all pretty anonymous filmmakers, which is like kind of great because there's no expectation. It's not Neil Marshall's next film, and it's not coming out next summer, So it's like, well, then just take another fucking year and work on the script.
Yeah.
Why not?
And this might be a topic for, I don't know, we might do it for Industry. I'd love to talk about it. But I've had this thing lately where, I love an ambiguous ending. I do. If it's justified and if it's earned. But I feel like so many indie horror movies lately, like they just go for the ambiguous, and it doesn't feel like it's earned in the way that it just feels like they cut it too early instead of that's the ending. We talked about in Josh's Horror or Not, we talked about David Lynch, who does ambiguous to the 10th degree, right? And yeah, but it seems fine. I never have to sit there and be like, oh, I want more from David Lynch because he gave me a complete story. The Shining, all these questions are out there in the open, but I still feel content with the movie. And yeah, something about a lot of kind of indie modern horror films coming out are all like they just end kind of either right after the climax, or they just don't have that third act. I feel like that's the new thing.
Well, and it feels it feels unintentional and lazy, and it feels like I like some art house movies that you can get burnt out because of all the reasons I just said about what you expect from a more conventional movie, but it does feel like there's a lot of people that are like, well, I kind of half-assed this, but it's art.
Yeah.
So you can't, like that's what I wanted it to be boring, and it's like, okay, come on. Like you have to be intentional here, because if you're asking people to be bored for like a reason, you know what I mean? If you're fucking think you're going to be Tarkovsky and you're going to make people sit for 4 hours because you have something more to do than just entertain them, you better be fucking right, or you just made, or you just wasted everyone's time.
Yeah. But I'll say this, that some stuff that we've watched and and I'll always support indie as much as I can. I'll search those out, especially nowadays a lot. And doing this podcast, I'll search those out more so than, major studio movies. But some of these are 80 minutes and they feel longer than watching Stalker. Like I'd rather sit there and watch Stalker. That's what clocks in at like 3 hours or whatever it is. And yeah, because somehow he makes that work, even if it's a long 30 or couple minute take. At least it's interesting.
I mean, it just underlines what we're saying. That's how you know that there's not enough story, because 80 minutes shouldn't feel long.
Yeah. Okay, so being one of our most passionate episodes, I think, from Kyle especially.
I think
if you want,
well, I think this. I don't know if you guys feel this way, because I definitely feel like the older I get, the more this becomes like. I used to be more tolerant, and the older I get, I'm just like, quit fucking around and entertain me. And if you want to be artistic, okay, if you're like up, if you can do it, but I don't know, I'm less forgiving to some extent, just because
But I don't think that necessarily even entails, like entertain me in the sense of like like short attention span. Like that's not what you're saying. You're saying like, you know, you're not willing to just sit there and, you know, meander through a movie that, you know,
Yeah,
is it
I
going to
mean,
work or not?
to me, it's not necessarily entertain you. It's move me. However you're
Yeah.
planning to do it. That could be entertaining. It could be making me cry. It could be making me laugh. It could be whatever you want it to be.
But just have you engaged, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with that being said, we can move on. Then actually, I guess it's weird because it feels like, as I said, as Josh was mentioning, it was only really 2 movies out of the 8. But for some reason this got pushed where this festival more than others felt like it really, maybe we're just again getting older, and because of COVID and stuck in our houses, we don't have the, you know, don't want to sit through that type of stuff right now. But it felt like it was more front and center. But yeah, and then we kind of go into these series of movies that I think were decent, but and they had great moments to it, but then also they kind of all of these middle ground movies that we're going to be discussing next without, well, I think we can kind of name names if they're middle ground because we're not
Yeah,
really.
just say
Yeah.
the names. I mean, that way, if
Yeah.
anyone's listening to this, then you know there's
Yeah.
no like mystery as to what the fuck we're
Yeah.
talking about.
So, you know, Monster Seafood Wars, Fried Berry, and then Hail to the Deadites would kind of be our middle ground ones, I think. Maybe even The Columnist. I think
I would put that in there too. Yeah.
And these were
I'll argue for The Columnist
Yeah.
being much better
Yeah.
than that.
So those movies were kind of in this border where this middle ground where there were like enough to push it forward and to make it a great story or what have you, but then also kind of had these lows or had these moments that harken back to, but not necessarily to the 2 other ones that we were just ranting about. So yeah, Kyle and then Josh, what if you wanted to talk about those 4 movies that were kind of, but I know you loved The Column. So there was actually one where we kind of, I forgot about that you and Josh were drastically different in your opinions on The Columnist.
I'll talk about The Columnist for my like favorite
Yes.
or whatever after this. But the other 3 for sure. Yeah, I mean it's they were okay. They had their problems. They weren't perfect. They were like Monster Seafood Wars is fun, but it wasn't quite as funny as you wanted it to be. I don't know. That was the problem. I was like, this is fun, whatever. At least they're not like being pretentious, but
Yeah.
but you could tell like they're trying to do kind of a lot on a really low budget, and it looked really low budget, and it was like they also didn't kind of dig as deep. I don't know. It's a ridiculous comedy, but it's still like, well, you could have maybe did a little bit more with the characters because it did start to feel maybe a little bit generic.
Yeah.
Or just broad, very broad. Fried Berry is interesting, but like that one definitely, because I read about how they improvised to create basically an entire film, and so you can tell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Most movies that are improvised do not work unless you hit. I think that's what
unless
filmmakers
you're Mike Lee or whatever, you're a genius.
I mean, I think filmmakers or actors a lot of times are like, oh, I'll just improvise it, which, you know, kind of disregarding the fact that there is a craft to improv. Like it's not, there's people that can do, you know, I've seen improv at tons of places, and I've, you know, met these people, and there are some that you watch and they just blow you away, and there's everything else, you know.
There's every improv show I don't want to go to.
Yeah. And that's what and improv just doesn't translate as well for me on screen as it does you know, through on a stage, because stage, I think you have that communal response, and there's a little bit more forgiving or whatever, and they can always go way over the top or whatever. But No, I think that was kind of some of the issue with these, where they were these ones that felt like they might be better. Like, for example, Fried Berry and Monster Seafood Wars for me felt like they'd be great if they were if we were able to see them in a theater, have that communal. Maybe because I was watching it virtually by myself, and watching something like Fried Berry by yourself at whatever time I watched it, midnight, just doesn't work as well. Maybe, I don't know.
I think with those two specifically, though, your mileage is going to vary because they speak to a very specific niche of people, and so I mean, not every film does that, thank God. But yeah, I mean, if you don't like kaiju, you're probably gonna be Monster Seafood Wars probably be the worst thing you've ever seen in your life. You probably won't even make it through it. Regardless of how much fun the filmmakers were obviously having. So I think with those two in particular, mileage is gonna vary for sure.
I agree. That's a good point. What was the other one besides the columnist?
Hail to the Deadites. Yeah. And that was good. It was just for me. So all three of us are big Evil Dead fans, and we actually went on Mad Monster. They brought us on to talk about Evil Dead, so that was fun. And we did a Facebook Live episode. That was the first Facebook Live thing we've done with them. But the whole Hail to the Deadites is about not the Evil Dead itself in that sense, but about the Evil Dead fans, and kind of you have this very strong, incredible fan base of Evil Dead fans, where they collect all this stuff, where they kind of talk about how if you have, for example, Nightmare on Elm Street fans, they're all obsessed about Freddy, or they're all obsessed about Nancy, right?
Yeah, Nancy, you son of a bitch.
Kyle loves Nightmare on Elm Street, so does Josh. But and the other ones. Anyways, so, but they love the icons, but for something like Evil Dead, it's not just about Bruce Campbell, or really he's the only main consistent one throughout, but it's that they're interested in the costume designers and the props, and they're like, it's learning about everything involved with the whole movie itself. And so that's basically what this documentary deals with, and it has some heartwarming moments where you get to see kind of what this this series has done for fans. And I mean, I enjoyed it. It is just one of those for me where it's it's a documentary, and it didn't really pull me into that extreme, like this is amazing or whatever. It's a fun documentary as a fan.
Yeah, I liked it too. I felt the same way, though. I mean, what Josh was just saying, it kind of perfectly contextualizes this documentary too. Yeah. Like, I don't think that was life-changing. I enjoyed it, but it is a niche thing. Yeah, if you're not going to recommend this to anybody, because if they don't really like, or if they're not even interested in Evil Dead, then I don't think they would be terribly interested in this.
Yeah. So that is our recommendation on that one. If you're an Evil Dead fan, definitely check it out. If not, you probably can just...
You're probably not even listening to the podcast.
Yeah. So let's get into, because this is Josh's middle ground and Kyle's...
Well, yeah, you guys can say what you're going to say on The Columnist.
So, next up we have The Columnist. For me, I liked it a lot. There were some points, I think, I can't remember. That was one of the first ones. I think that was the first one Korea was the first one I watched, which I just gave away the name. Anyways,
I take pity on you.
Yeah, but that was early on in the.
I can't believe you followed through and watched anything else after doing that first.
Well, I watched. So we gave away the movie title.
Son of a bitch.
Yeah.
So I watched it, and I think that's, if you read our reviews, you'll learn that. And in the initial reaction, we always do an initial reaction, and then a response to each other's. So when we first write, we don't know what everybody else is thinking. We post, and then we read what everybody else is what the other two are thinking, and then we have, we respond. I was definitely the nicest one for that, and it could be because I watched it later in the night, and it could, yeah. It was
because
like,
you fell asleep.
no, I didn't fall asleep, but because of the toddler and all of that, I do most of my work, at like from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. So it was one of those where I watched it and it was like, oh, like, okay, this isn't too bad. And then as the days went by, I was like, wait a minute, my brain tricked me. And then I read your guys, because you guys, I think, watched some of the other stuff first. And then I read yours. I was like, oh yeah.
Craig,
Yeah,
you made a comparison to The Wicker Man and Kill List. Your brain was clearly not functioning properly.
I didn't compare. I said that it was attempting to be.
Either way.
Yeah. Because it's the same company that did Kill List, I think. It's Ben Wheatley's company or something.
Really? Wow.
Oh, it was? I didn't even know that.
Or one of the producers, or I can't remember. It's like the same. They said the same company that did In Fabric, which is an episode we talked about, and
really?
Yeah, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, that's astounding.
That's such a disparity there.
Yeah. So that being said, with The Columnist, I watched that one and I thought it was great. It's one of those where, to give a kind of synopsis, I forgot which. She's a columnist who does like your normal kind of fluff pieces for a newspaper, and then she goes on talking about how, why aren't people listening to each other more and being nicer, and all these trolls are attacking her, stuff like that, as they do nowadays. And
right.
she starts taking matters into her own hands and killing these trolls. But then it gets to a point where at first not even at first, they're kind of there's some that are obviously jerks, but you're kind of watching it and realizing that these online trolls, some of them aren't necessarily that bad of people. And so it starts kind of merging that, that boundary of, obviously it's not good that she's killing these people, but it plays with it more of, as she's going deeper and deeper in this, there's also, you're seeing that more sympathetic of, she's falling right into the people that were criticizing her and attacking her. Yeah, there's a lot to it. I had fun with it. There were some points, little, not plot holes, I'd say. There were points where the story went in a direction where I think, I can't remember fully. I don't even know what I'm saying right now. But yeah, I mean, I think I ended up falling in the middle between Josh and Kyle, but I will let Josh go first.
I mean, I don't really remember there being that big of a disparity in our thoughts. I felt like the movie was fine. But I felt like it was like it was funny, but it wasn't that funny. It was absurd, but it wasn't that absurd. It was like it was almost like it was being held back for some reason.
That was your review. A lot of it was that I think we're saying you wanted it just should have taken that one step further with everything.
Right, and it just I felt like it there were multiple times where, at least in my own head, I was like, well, fuck, I would have done this way. I would have done this way. Clearly that doesn't really mean shit because I didn't make it. But it was just like, it should have taken further steps, I think, to, I don't know, just and perhaps, had more to do with, budgetary stuff and because I think one of the things I was like thinking of is, as she's killing people, which the whole idea is absurd. I mean, not in a bad way, but it's like I would have just went nuts with Caro syrup, and you know what I'm saying? Just go so fucking far with it because I mean it's completely absurd. That being said, I didn't not like it. I thought it was good until it got to about the last 10 minutes too. But nobody's perfect.
Okay, so Kyle, this was actually one of your highlights, and you, I think, even said to me that it make your top 10 of the year list.
I would say so for sure. Yeah, I liked it a lot. I mean, I can definitely see where you guys are coming from, and specifically Josh. I think I know exactly why Josh didn't like it, and it's more to me, the restraint that they had was to do with what they were like. Clearly, they were more interested in the satirical, topical shit that was happening more than where it was gonna go. So I do like, and I think it's kind of a stretch to call it a horror comedy. Like it is, but like in our minds, what we want out of a horror comedy, it doesn't really deliver that. I would just call it a satire or a dark comedy.
Yeah.
But I really liked it. I felt like that fit with the tone that they set. So I wasn't necessarily expecting them to go more over the top with what was happening. But I just thought it was a brilliant commentary on social media and how like her killing people isn't the answer. These people are assholes, but ultimately it's human nature. If you can be anonymous, it's clear that people are going to be cruel as long as they can maintain their anonymity. And then if you confront them, then they're not they're not going to be that tough about it. But what do? Yeah, you also can't fucking kill them.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with you, Colin. I think, I agree with Josh. I think that's what I was trying to say, that there were points where I think wanted a little bit more, but it is, again, I think it's Danish, right? Or it's...
Yeah, I think it is.
Something like that.
Yeah, so it has that Scandinavian kind of dry approach. That you'll see in a lot of those. They're dark comedies or black comedies, however you want to describe them.
It also, I think the one criticism you could have, given that it doesn't go that far over the top, is she kills a lot of people and she's not very
she's very
clever.
messy.
Yeah, so I mean that's where that maybe doesn't fit within the more subdued tone, because she would have got caught obviously a lot sooner.
Yeah, I think that was the big thing that I had. We should have probably went back through all our reviews doing that, but because she collects the fingers too.
Yeah.
And somehow the cops, even though they know that these were all trolls against her, eventually they know that somebody's cutting off the fingers and all this, series of stuff. And, it never feels, even though cops come to her house, I think at one point, but it never feels like she's a prime suspect.
That, and so she collects the fingers and puts them in her freezer, and she lives with two other people who never fucking find that shit.
They do.
I know, but it takes the 90 minutes for him to find it, and it's like, you motherfuckers not get anything out of that freezer ever?
They're in a box of frozen peas.
Yeah. Nobody likes peas.
Yeah,
that's true.
Nobody likes peas.
So with that one being said, here are our top 2. Now I'm going to go with probably the most fun of the festival, and that was the Shakespeare shitstorm, which is the Trauma movie. For me, this was, I mean, we've kind of talked about it in a review if you'd read it. If not, you'll hear us talk about it more right now. That this, if you're a Trauma fan, you'll already know what you're getting into. If you're not, but you know of Trauma, you'll already know what you're getting into. So the name itself of Trauma, you're already, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't.
Mhm.
But this is almost kind of pinnacle Trauma film. I think they throw in every little thing that's a culmination of their whole work. I feel like I've said that, I can't remember if I wrote this in the review, but I know I've said it to both of you guys, where it just feels like if they ended on this movie, it'd be perfect, because it's the most trauma of trauma movies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. But the story is basically Shakespeare's The Tempest, kinda. But it deals again with social media, it deals with kind of PC,
What doesn't it deal with?
yeah, cancel culture, it deals with all sorts of things.
Sex,
yeah.
drugs, violence.
Yeah. So yeah, Kyle and Josh love this movie, so I'll pass it on to them.
Yeah, it was fucking great. I think it probably had more impact because it was part of this festival lineup, and so I think with a lot of festivals, there are some movies that are maybe taking themselves too seriously, and this is a movie that does not take itself seriously at all, and it's probably a time when we all want to just laugh at stuff, and this is like, makes fun of everyone and everything, and is just totally kind of over the top and fun and goofy and great.
Okay.
Yeah, so in talking about The Columnist, I was talking about how it should have gone more over the top. Well, this did it in droves for it, because, I mean, it's just fucking nuts. And, I mean, they literally just don't give a shit. There's people covered in shit. There's fucking sex. There's drugs. There's everything else that I love. And it's just fucking hilarious, too.
There's
I
mutant
don't.
orgy.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know that I've laughed at something that hard and long, and I can't even tell you how long. I mean, it was, again, it's your mileage is going to vary, because if you don't, if you're not into pretty much everything I just mentioned, this movie's going to offend the fucking shit out of you. But if you love all of that stuff, like I do, I mean, you can't go wrong. And I think it might actually be Lloyd Kaufman's best movie ever.
I agree. I think I think so too.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
definitely how's the way to put it? So those that aren't familiar with Trauma in the same sense, they did Toxic Avenger, they did Class of Nukem High, a series of stuff that always deals with some chemical waste, mutant type people, stuff like that.
And what's the name of that one really serious one that was on Last Drive-In?
Trauma's War.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
That was their attempt to do, I think, something.
It's not that serious.
Yeah. It's not. I couldn't remember if it. I think just compared to Shakespeare's shitstorm, though, fucking anything is going to be serious. You know what I mean?
But it's basically in their approach. It's like because South Park originated from Trauma, and they did Cannibal the Musical, which is done by Trey Parker. Then Matt Stone was involved, and then so it has that kind of element, but almost grittier and not as refined. So yeah, for those of you that don't know, Trauma is basically a live action version to the extreme and dumbed down of South Park in a way, I guess. Is the best way of describing it.
Yeah.
It's dumb, but it's also smart as hell.
Yeah, they deal with, and Lloyd Kaufman himself is incredibly talented and educated man. If you hear him talk, he's very intellectual, but the movies he makes are always like that, where it's dealing with a subject, but through kind of like an 80s raunchy sex comedy horror vibe thing. So the movie itself, again, is like The Tempest. You have a bunch of people that own a pharmaceutical company on a boat, on a yacht, partying, heading towards Spain or Italy or Greece. I can't remember.
Who cares?
It doesn't matter.
They're heading somewhere.
Yeah, it does not matter.
Anyways, a storm comes and all the whales, I forgot the term, but
fecal bloom.
Yep. It's so when whales poop, they do that, and so they start jumping over the boat and spraying poop to the point that The boat then gets flooded with it, and then a hurricane comes, I guess, and picks up the whales, making it even worse. And then they all end up at the worst place they could ever dream, New Jersey, is what they say. And then it turns out, again, if you know Shakespeare's The Tempest, that was all a plan of this guy that kind of wanted to enact revenge on these people because he was screwed over by them years and years ago. And they go to a house and take drugs and party, and yeah, that's how he has a plan to kind of get his revenge.
And then it turns into Society.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, that one.
I mean, it can't. Nothing about this movie was bad. So.
Yeah, and it's like, it's very refreshing, as Josh said, to see somebody that doesn't care in an age, where everyone is just looking to fucking snipe you or just find something. I don't know. Everyone's looking to be offended, and it's, and be offended by what you might think is funny. I don't know. So it's refreshing to see someone who is not calculating every move.
Yeah. But I've actually found it's interesting because, so there's the whole thing that, when the world seems like it's better off, that's when more serious horror is more predominant, and then when the world is scary and stuff like that, people turn to comedy, and so like a lot of movies, as Kyle was kind of mentioning prior, seem like they were trying to be very serious, and even just in general, it seems like a lot of what we screened lately is a lot more serious in its approach, but the ones that I'm really kind of finding myself attached to are the ones that, are kind of taking that comic approach personally, because it feels fresh, feels like, we're dealing with COVID and we're dealing with the Black Lives Matter movement and all of this horrible stuff in the States. If you're listening to it, you'll know what we're talking about. Well, most people know what's going on with America anyways. So, but, this just feels refreshing to kind of watch. And
yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Yeah. I mean, if we turn on if we do anything, you're confronted with what's going on and how serious it is. And not that it's not important, but it can be exhausting.
Yeah.
I think.
So going on to our top, well, it was definitely my top. It's probably I don't know if it's theirs as well. Shakespeare Shitstorm might be closer to their top, but Detention, which is serious, and Detention is based off of Taiwanese, right?
Yeah.
Yes, video game that is about in kind of 1960s Taiwan, which was I guess ruled by China, and it was basically a very fascist government there, and it's about a book club reading banned books, and then finally these two students, they awaken in what is, in my review I kind of mentioned, and for American audiences they might know a little bit better, it almost feels like a weird version of Silent Hill, where it's like this afterlife type of world. And then it's these authoritarian monsters, and they're trying to figure out kind of what happened and who gave them all up and who gave up their names and stuff like that. And I liked it a lot. It is, of course, a drastic turn from Shakespeare Shitstorm. That's very serious. It deals with heavy stuff, and it's a movie that, apparently, reading about it, did really well and was up for all of these awards in China, but then was basically banned because of its subject matter, to the point where everything was erased on the movie, and it's only regarded as XX in mainland China because of its criticism of the Chinese government. You can find it all on its wiki page and stuff like that. But it was nominated for, I think, more awards than other films of that time, and
That's messed up.
It is.
Yeah, I had actually heard about the video game prior, just as like a horror video game that would be interesting to check out. But that's interesting because they made a sequel to this game, or sort of a spiritual sequel, and that, I know that happened. You can't even play that game.
Yeah.
You can't even play that game here, I guess, because it's
Oh.
because they made fun of some leader, like very obscurely somewhere in the game, and then the whole game is banned. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely different than Shakespeare's Shitstorm, but it's great. I probably like Shakespeare Shitstorm selfishly just because it's more like enjoyable, but this was like equally as good in my book. I think it's kind of reflective of the best that horror can do in terms of like illustrating a social issue in a fairly simple story, that anyone could follow, that still works as a horror movie, but has much deeper layers, and even had like the subplot with the teacher and the student fall. Like, it even had stuff that just worked as like a good drama that was like, this is just a really good film, and it's kind of moving through all these different tones and modes, and it works.
Josh, what are your thoughts?
I did not know that this was a video game, and I'm really glad that I didn't know that before I saw it. I got this really shitty feeling about video game movies, so I think it would have soured my perspective before I even watched any of it. So I was really glad that I didn't know that. And knowing it, finding out after the fact, I was just astounded, because video game movies suck. And this obviously did not. I mean, this, for me personally, this is second of the fest, just because I think Shakespeare Shitstorm's better. But this film was amazing, and people need to see it. And I have a feeling that it's going to be hard for people to see. Because it was really well made, and it's got such Asian sensibilities, in terms of everything about it. It's very dreamy. The logic of the plot is very dreamy. I wasn't sure that I ever was really 100% aware of what was going on, but it didn't matter. And with something like one of the two shitty ones we saw, you didn't know what was going on in one of those, and that was problematic, because with detention, you're always in this kind of state of dread too, whether you can understand what's going on or not. So I thought it was great. I almost watched it again after doing the review.
Yeah. No, it what's interesting with it is the dread isn't even just supernatural, because even when they're in the real world, or however you want to phrase it, you have the dread of a fascist government, which is almost scarier than ghosts and stuff like that. But yeah, it deals with a lot. I would agree about there's a lot of kind of Asian storytelling involved that may be hard for some Western audiences, and especially with modern audiences. There's this element of basically, I think she's like a 14 or 15-year-old student who is having an affair with a teacher, is what it kind of insinuates. And
which was admittedly the hardest thing to suspend your disbelief on. So
and I know that reading about it afterwards, that was one of the issues with some American press, was it doesn't ever really identify it fully, or it just kind of like, oh, they're having this affair and moves on. I think that was kind of the criticism about it, in modern day. But then there was also there was CGI monsters, but I think the CGI works great.
Looked good.
Yeah. And I mean, I enjoyed it a lot. It was my kind of top of the festival.
I mean, had Shakespeare's Shitstorm not been there, it would have been mine too.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was I mean, kind of, unless any of us have anything more to say on any of these movies, I think I would agree with Josh that I think Detention is probably going to end up being one of those ones that will be hard to find after this. Like, I don't know what company is going to pick it up, but they should definitely, because, I mean, it was kind of head and shoulders above most of what we saw, and
For sure.
it does, yeah, it deserves it. But that was Fantasia Fest for you. That's what we got to see. So obviously, we can't. Our opinion is only based on the 8 movies we saw, and not based on them as a whole. Kyle also got to see one, which I don't know if you watched. That
I haven't watched.
Wasn't horror, but yeah.
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet. I'm gonna watch it soon, but it's Nobuhiko Obayashi's last film, the guy who made House. But I think it's just kind of a drama. But I'm down.
Yeah. But yeah.
For 3 hours of your life.
Dude, I watched one of his. I think it was the movie he did in 2017, but that was, I think, over 3 hours. But it was really good. I mean, it was really long, but it was good.
Well, you have to let us know. And the next, so the next episode we'll be having when we're all back together will be a return to our normal kind of episodes. And I think I forgot the order right now. So who is? It's either.
It's me.
Yep. So Kyle, do you have what the?
Yeah, I picked them the other time, and we've been doing stuff. But Don't Torture a Duckling and The Beyond.
Okay, so check us out next time if you want to watch one of those before. We're actually going to be moving forward. We're going to choose one of the movies that we're picking for those episodes is going to be something that can be found easily through Netflix, Amazon Prime, or other sites like that, so that we can actually do a kind of live tweeting kind of watch party with everybody, and we'll have more information on that moving forward. But thank you all for listening, and as always, stay safe and take care.
Bloodhound Pix podcast is part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcast Network. Produced by Josh Lee, Craig Draheim, and Kyle Hintz. Music by Raymond Seed. Editing by Kyle Hintz.